Good evening, Crime Crunchies. Thank you so much for joining me. I am your host, Courtney C., a 27-year veteran of the media, and I'm so happy to be able to bring you Crime Crunchies. Woohoo! Thank you again so much for joining me tonight. We are going to be profiling the profiler. So my little brain starts thinking, and it's like, okay, we've had 4 months now. We've had a lot more information that has been, spewing in. We've got a few really good profilers: Dr. Gary Brucato, Dr. Ann Burgess, John Fitzgerald, Jim Clemente. And I was just kind of thinking, wow, has any of their profiling changed as time has gone on and we've learned a little bit more? We've had these weird notes. So I thought, you know what? Let's see what we can do. Let's see what we can figure out. So we're going to dive right in. I'm going to share my screen. We're going to be working with Chad, my best friend Chad, ChatGPT. And while I am sharing my screen, please subscribe if you have not already. It is completely free. I do have a new sponsor, though. I have a new sponsor of tonight's program. Tonight's sponsor is Chris Nanos Deodorant. Chris Nanos Deodorant is working overtime, unlike Chris Nanos, especially after the gym. All right, so we are going to go to Chat GPT. Here is Chad, my lovely friend. And so, you know what? Thank goodness for AI. I'm telling you that right now. I work a full-time job. I don't think I could do anything like this without Chad, my best friend Chad. So what I asked Chad is, please do a side-by-side comparison. What was my original? Can you find the earliest video where Dr. Gary Brucato analyzes the Nancy Guthrie Kidnapper, as well as the latest video where Dr. Brucato analyzes the profile? I'm trying to find both videos so I can compare profiles from the earliest to the latest. So Chad did give me some earliest videos, which apparently February 2026, he went on with Brian Enton Investigates. And the title of that video was Nancy Guthrie, Suspect is Likely Someone She Knew. And we're going to look at that in a moment. But in this earliest interview, Dr. Gary Brucato's profile was necessarily tentative because investigators had released very little evidence. He reportedly emphasized themes such as the offender was likely organized rather than impulsive. The crime appeared highly targeted, not random. The victim was probably selected for a specific reason. The offender might be someone known to Nancy or her family rather than a random stranger. The behavior suggested planning before the kidnapping. And again, in February, we knew nothing. We knew nothing, nada. And, from what I've seen, I don't think I watched TIR in the very beginning of the Idaho 4 case, but apparently Chris McDonough has gone back to, one of the first episodes where Gary did a profile that supposedly matched Brian. Oh my gosh, I do this every time. Brian, the weirdo, that matched him to a T. And so I thought, well, okay, what do we know about this guy? And I think it's a little bit more complex because I think we all at this point agree that there's a mastermind and that Porch Guy is a stooge. So it could be a layered profile. So some of these things may fit Porch Guy, or do they fit mastermind? I'm not thinking Brian Enton. He was the guy who killed the 4 students in Idaho. I do this every time. I just have this brain fart. So we know who he is. But anyway, Dr. Brucato got his profile, pretty early on, saying he was probably mechanical. He was odd. Kohberger. Yes. Brian Kohberger, that he was, had trouble with women. It was quick to anger. So again, I just wanted to see what he said in the beginning with kind of what we know or what we've seen with these notes. So his latest profile analysis is from 4 days ago on TIR with Chris McDonough. And since months of evidence had accumulated, Brocado discussed topics including the evolving behavioral picture of the offender, the meaning of the repeated ransom communications, whether the offender appeared to crave attention, geographic and behavioral implications of the buried with nature wording, whether the latest communications represented escalation or consistency. So I'm going to kind of skip some of this other stuff because what Chad did for me next is he gave me a side-by-side characteristic of earliest analysis to the latest analysis and if there was any change. And so this, I haven't gone through it. Again, I don't like to go through a lot of this before I go live because I want to have an authentic response along with you. So let's just see what it had to say. So after comparing Dr. Gary Brocado's earliest public profile, his appearance with Brian Enton shortly after the kidnapping, with his most recent appearances, something interesting emerges. His core behavioral profile has remained remarkably consistent. Now, keep in mind, Dr. Gary Brocado has one of the largest databases of criminal minds ever. Like, he has taken every criminal that he has heard of, talked to, everything, and he's put them in, like, I don't know if it's a spreadsheet or a database, but he literally puts each person in, what they did, probably what they were thinking, what they were thinking before, during, after. And so he's able to then develop patterns for any type of crime. And over time, you see similarities in people that do these things. Rather than reversing earlier opinions, he has generally added confidence or refined them as additional evidence, particularly the ransom notes and public communications became available. So this would be very interesting to go back when they finally have, this monster and see how it lays. So let's look side by side. So the characteristic victim selection, the earliest analysis, Dr. Gary said Nancy was almost certainly specifically chosen, still believes Nancy was deliberately targeted, so there's been no change. A random crime, he said very unlikely to be random, even less likely after ransom communication. So his profile has strengthened over time. Planning, considerable planning before the kidnapping, continues to believe this was highly organized, so no change. Organization level, organized offender, organized offender who adapted over time, so it's expanded. Knowledge of victim, may know Nancy or someone close to her, continues to consider a connection to Nancy or her family plausible. He has actually, I definitely don't want to say doubled down on what Chris McDonough, his angle. We all know that Chris McDonough, without saying it, really suspects the family. Okay. But I know that Dr. Gary has come out recently with some of these, latest notes and has used adjectives such as poetic, written by a woman, things like that. And so, come on. I mean, he's not going to ever say it. But I have to think that these guys are still feeling the family. And because of that, I was kicking them off the table at one point, and I had even argued and listed bullet points of why it couldn't be the family. But the little circle that I put them in on the corner of my desk is kind of growing. I would say my theory of it being connected with the family or a wrench attack, it could be even, you guys. It really could be, especially since Annie and Tommaso have not been seen in weeks. Are they in hiding? What's going on? What's going on? And, I don't know. It just seems weird, especially when you think about Cameron going and picking up Nancy's SUV at the house and leaving. And of course, he sped out of the driveway, but you could clearly see him. But when Annie and Tommaso are leaving the driveway, they've got hoodies pulled over. It's like they're celebrities and they're trying to avoid the paparazzi or something. So not how an innocent person acts, I don't think. So I'm just saying, Okay, violence, comfortable using force if necessary. And now believes offender has little empathy and will use violence when needed. So it's expanded. Obviously, if this guy is going to freaking hit an 84-year-old woman, just irritating. Control, crime centered on controlling the victim. Communication pattern almost also demonstrate control over the family. So it has expanded significantly. But again, these are, if you notice these words, it's either expanded, slightly strengthened, or no change. Nothing has changed. Here's a major evolution. So there is something that has changed down below. Okay. Manipulation, likely manipulative. Ransom letters viewed as manipulation and psychological domination. So it's much stronger. But I think that basically, when I'm looking at this, it's the same, but he's able to add a little bit more flavor to his profile. And that's pretty much it. He's just adding flavor. So this guy is definitely honed in on his database for sure. Need for power, likely enjoys controlling events, continues emphasizing dominance as a central motive, so that's strengthened. Risk tolerance, willing to take calculated risks. Repeated notes show offender remains confident despite investigation, so that's for sure. Emotional profile, cold and emotionally detached, continues describing emotional attachment with possible narcissistic traits. That's where you get something scary. When you have somebody who's emotionally detached, a narcissist, that's the psychopath. When they have no remorse, and that's the psychopath. That's where it gets really scary. So narcissism, suggested possibility, and now a much greater emphasis on narcissistic behavior through communications. This guy wants attention. Attention seeking, mentioned as possible, but now we've got public notes suggest desire to remain psychologically present in the investigation. And boy, this guy, he wants a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, doesn't he? He tunes in every day to Harvey Levin, and he's watching Savannah. He's watching these people. He likes seeing them talk about this. I think that he gets a high. If you think about someone who has like a dirty little secret, it's my dirty little secret. I know all the secrets. That's a very powerful feeling when you've got the entire world just completely confused and you're like just sitting there going, tee, sick. Communication. Unsure if offender would continue communicating. Continue letters become part of the offender's behavioral signature. So that's the major evolution. And you know what? Honestly, if that's the only major evolution is the communication, I still say he's dead on. I still say Dr. Gary's dead on. Fantasy, so possible fantasy component. And this is where I don't know if he's talking, if this is a fantasy, like a sexual type fantasy, or committing a crime, if maybe they get a high off of committing a crime and that's the fantasy. Public communications may reinforce the offender's internal fantasy and sense of importance. Again, that is tying directly back to that psychopath, where the narcissist, the need for attention, that could be the fantasy for sure. It's 15 minutes of fame. Psychopathy, compatible with psychopathic traits. Here comes the nut train. Still compatible, though he has generally avoided making a clinical diagnosis publicly. And if you know Dr. Gary, like I do, you know that he's very, very careful about saying, I've never spoken or, counseled or interviewed this person. So I do not feel comfortable giving any type of diagnosis. So he's always very careful about that. social appearance may appear normal to acquaintances, continues to describe a wolf in sheep's clothing presentation. So let's think about that. If this is Annie, you know, Annie was older than Savannah. Annie might have been Daddy's little girl. Daddy died. Savannah was 16. Annie was, a few years, I don't know what their age difference is, but she's a few years older. Was there some sort of a resentment? Did things get worse after Dad died? Did things get better after Dad died for Savannah? Did things get worse for Annie? Did Annie not benefit from some of the things that maybe Savannah did after Dad died? She got all the attention. Savannah went on to be in a sorority. Was Annie in a sorority and have that kind of was she popular? Was Annie not popular? Savannah's very pretty. Annie's a pretty woman as well, but is Savannah a little bit prettier than Annie? Savannah's taller. Savannah is on the Today Show. Is there some sort of nasty, just under the crust? Is there some type of deceiving jealousy? Savannah's got millions of dollars, and Annie and Tomasa are scraping by. Mom, I'm out here. I'm out here taking care of Mom. Savannah's back living, a New York high private jet Hollywood lifestyle. Okay, she's going to all the invites, all the cool things. She's going to go host the Olympics. And I'm over here having to change the sheets because Mom peed the bed last night by accident. Not judging. It happens when you get older. I'm not making it a negative thing, but I mean, this is the reality of taking care of your mother. We have no idea the dynamic. And honestly, I mean, I haven't looked into the poetry. Apparently somebody, I think it was Justin on Clutch Them Pearls, said that he looked into her poetry and it's somewhat dark. I mean, she might have some issues. That's all I'll say. If Annie has issues, I could see very, very, very easily that Annie could be a wolf in sheep's clothing. All lovey-dovey. I mean, look at them when they were on the Today Show segment at the restaurant. When Savannah is the center of attention, Savannah is directing questions to her mother, not talking to Annie. I don't remember Annie saying anything in that segment. Okay. Does Annie feel shut out? Again, Savannah gets to come in for all the good times. Savannah gets to come in when we're going to go and have lunch and we're going to go to the movies, or we're going to go have dinner, or we're going to go, talk about memory lane and look through pictures. Okay. And then Savannah's going to jet back off to New York and host the Olympics in Italy, while Annie is struggling to make ends meet and running to the store to get her mother's prescriptions refilled, doing her laundry, trying to find her stuff because she can't find this, or she can't use the remote, or she can't use the computer, she can't add an attachment, whatever. Okay. Look who drew the short straw. Hello. I'm trying to figure out who you are, Perfectly Made. Do I know you perfectly? Hello. I love your hearts. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for coming by. All right, let me quit yapping. Let me go back. Ability to blend in, very high. High, likely trusted by others. Intelligence, above average planning ability, continues emphasizing behavioral sophistication over brute force. Expanded. Impulsivity, low. Still believe the offender is deliberate rather than impulsive. For sure, because this was a long game. This person had the patience of a saint. Financial motive could be genuine but uncertain. Increasingly suggests money alone may not explain the offender's behavior. And, I had gone down a slight kind of turn where if we think about it, let's say Tommaso, I don't know, people have said he has a gambling problem. It could be anything. Let's just say they're having tough times. He doesn't have to be a gambling person. He doesn't have to do this. I mean, if he's making on average at the school, a teacher makes on average $53,000. She's selling jewelry in a community outreach program. And we all know nonprofits, they're not paying six figures to people who are making jewelry, okay, and selling their jewelry. All right. She's doing good for the community, but she's not going to get wealthy. We don't know if somebody bought her home for her. Could be a gift. Maybe Savannah took care of her sister because, and honestly, hey, if my sister's taking care of my mom and I've got $45 million and her house is $600,000 or $700,000, I'm buying my sister a house. Sorry, because she's doing all the hard work. So maybe Savannah did buy her house. But if they're in trouble and there is some Bitcoin, okay, if there's a loan shark situation, the whole Derek Kalela thing, which we all know there's more there. There has to be more there. There has to be more there. That is not a normal, just random text. Two texts to people with, do you have the Bitcoin? They're waiting for it. That's a previous conversation and then a 9-second phone call. Days after mom dies. It sounds to me like, did they get desperate? So when they're walking down, and I like calling him Tomato, I do like calling him Tomato, to pay respect, it looks completely performative. They had to do something because the bears were coming out for Tomato, okay? It was very ugly in the media. They had to do something. But when the ladies put the flowers down, you see Tomato putting his arms around both ladies, both about Annie and Savannah, and he's like, just jerks them in. He's like, I'm gonna make it look like I'm hugging you both. Like Someone's been commenting on my last video that Annie was a Wiccan. I don't know. If someone's saying Nancy was a witch, I have trouble with that because she was supposedly very Catholic, very godly. She was on a pedestal, very religious, walk the walk, talk the talk. I don't know that a very religious Catholic woman is going to be a witch, but supposedly Annie was Wiccan. And if there's dark poetry and Tomato was in, like this crazy rock band and weird titles, like graphic titles. And I don't know the music, but I mean, maybe that's what drew them together. It's hard to say. Personal grievance is possible, gives greater weight to grievance or personal obsession. And I absolutely 2000% believe that whatever happened here is revenge or retaliation. Relationship to Savannah mentioned only cautiously because in the beginning, nobody knew. It was just speculation. More willing to discuss it. The family, particularly Savannah, may be part of the offender's psychological focus was expanded carefully. Likelihood of multiple offenders, open to either possibility, continues discussing both solo and multiple offender scenarios depending on evidence. Future communications is possible. Repeated communications fit the expected behavioral pattern. Need to feel superior is suggested. Stronger emphasis after repeated letters. And I think that my feeling was always that this person felt entitled to something and that they felt, equal. But lately, there's something coming out that one of the first notes was titled, "Hello, Savannah." You can almost hear that in like a creepy, like Hannibal Lecter. "Hello, Savannah." Creepy, creepy. "Hello, Savannah." Just creepy. Ability to deceive high. Continue stressing deception. Okay, so early on, Brucato primarily discussed physical control during the kidnapping. Months later, he spends much more time discussing psychological control, controlling investigators, controlling the family, controlling media, deciding when new information appears. Narcissism has become more prominent, enjoys being the unseen author of events. That's that little, "I have a secret. I like having a secret." It gives them a feeling of power, like, "Oh my gosh, I know something that no one else knows, and boy, would they love to know what I know." Wants investigators thinking about them, enjoys creating uncertainty, wants to demonstrate superiority. All right. Some things that have not changed, which is what I really wanted to see. What has stuck? Perhaps the most striking point is that Brucato has never dramatically changed his opinion on the offender's fundamental nature. So this is the person. Whoever has masterminded this is driving the bus, is organized, calculating, patient, emotionally cold, manipulative, capable of appearing completely ordinary, motivated by control as much as or perhaps more than money, likely to have selected Nancy for a reason rather than at random. And of course, we know that. So I wanted to see what Dr. Ann Burgess, so has tended, so this is, we're now switching to Dr. Ann Burgess. So Dr. Ann has tended to approach it from the behavior of victims, offender motivation, and investigative strategy. That reflects her decades of work studying trauma victims and helping build the FBI's behavior profiling program. So the characteristic, Nancy as intended victim, her early opinion was unsure. Considered Nancy may have been targeted personally. Current opinion increasingly believes Nancy may have been a means to hurt someone else. So that has shifted. Retribution motive, mentioned only as one possibility. And now she places much greater weight on retaliation or revenge. So that's much stronger. Money motive was left open. She now believes money alone does not fully explain the crime, which I think we all agree. So that has shifted. Victim selection, deliberate, not random, still deliberate, so no change there. Planning, significant planning, continues emphasizing careful prep, no change. Violence, blood indicates events did not go as planned, still believes something went wrong, so no change. Relationship to family, possible family connection. So now she has greater focus on someone wanting to hurt the family emotionally, and this is not just Savannah. So that has strengthened. She's saying hurting the family. Savannah as a psychological target. She earlier mentioned it cautiously, but now openly discusses Savannah as someone who may have been the intended emotional target rather than the physical victim. So definitely something by proxy. Prior contact with Savannah, suggested investigators should examine it. Continues pressing investigators should look for prior letters, threats, or unwanted contact. So that's been consistent. Multiple offenders. So if you're just joining us, just FYI, what I'm doing is I'm comparing profilers from what they said early on to what they've said most recently, 4 months in, and with a bit more information. Multiple offenders possible. Now increasingly believes more than one offender is plausible, so that is strengthened. Likelihood of repeat offense earlier was unknown. Now it is, if this is a personal retaliation, she thinks the offender is less likely to strike another unrelated family. So expanded. However, this contradicts Chris Nanos, because somebody had again asked Chris Nanos during the 2.3 press conference that he graced us with, and had asked if the public was safe or if this person could strike again. And Chris Nanos said, yeah, this person could strike again. So are we really safe? Could they really strike again? And I give very, very little credence to anything Chris Nanos says, because honestly, he's word salad like extraordinaire. And I don't think he knows anything. I think he really just wants to be out front. Okay, behavioral sophistication was organized, still organized, and capable of planning, so no change. Communication after kidnapping, she said, let's wait to see if communications reveal motive. And now she's saying treats ransom notes as important behavioral evidence, so that was expanded. Need for publicity is possible, but now definitely gives more weight to communications designed to affect the family psychologically, strengthened. Investigative strategy, follow evidence carefully. Now, strong advocate for releasing additional information that could generate leads. Brava. That's exactly what I say. They need to release so much more. If they don't have a person, they need to release more goodies. We need to see it all. Public assistance helpful if needed, and now believes additional evidence could safely be released to simulate tips. And again, as I said last night, I firmly believe that the information from the ransom note that surprisingly showed up with Howard Blum for an article was completely dripped by the FBI to tickle the wire and see what would happen. And it did not disappoint. And I think it was good because the legacy media had not been covering this at all. And, you know, YouTubers are getting arrested, which it looks like a lot of the charges were dropped, at least for, I think Juice got his dropped. Correct me if I'm wrong. And then 857, his was dropped as well, which is good. I'm not sure that Alex is going to be so lucky, even though I don't know, if it didn't really look like he was he was kind of resisting arrest. He just looked pissed. And I think that the guys were kind of tripping him, making him look worse. So I don't know. I think that's a draw, but he might have more trouble not getting his charges dropped. But the point is that for a good chunk of time, YouTubers were the only one talking about this poor woman. And now the legacy media is it's front and center, and it needs to be there. These people that are working on this, they need to have pressure. They need to get this shit done. Excuse me. Oops. They need to get this thing done. All right. So Savannah has become much more central to her behavioral analysis. This is still Dr. Amber Jess. She places increasing value on the ransom communications, although the jury is totally out on whether those are real. And I have serious concerns that they're not, because there were some inconsistencies. I did a little bit of analysis on them last night. And there's just some inconsistencies and things that just don't make, you know, why didn't they lead with this video months ago? Where was this magical video? And they don't want to share a screenshot for metadata, but they're cool handing over an entire device. Oh no, there's no metadata on a video. I don't know. It's just, the math ain't mathin' with that one. So I don't know. Where Dr. Burgess and Dr. Brucato strongly agreed, the victim was almost certainly not selected at random. The offense appears planned rather than impulsive. The offender's behavior suggests organization and forethought. The communications provide meaningful behavioral clues, not just demands. There may be a motive that extends beyond simply obtaining money. Where they differ, Brocado spends more time describing the offender's personality, control, manipulation, narcissistic traits, psychological dominance, and deception. Burgess spends more time asking who was intended to suffer emotionally, examining victimology, trauma, and whether the crime reflects retaliation against someone in Nancy's orbit. And I think this is brilliant because we do need both of those, because it's not just offender, it's victim. They go together, because you can't, is it the chicken or the egg? Is it the victim driving the offender, or is the offender following the victim? They go together. All right, Jim Clemente. And so he is probably one of the only ones that is thinking that it's one offender. And he's sticking to that only because he says, logically, there's absolutely no evidence indicating more than one. We only see one person, but that's only because they've revealed one person. Okay. There is an image of somebody in the backyard that we haven't seen, and we don't know if it's the same person. They haven't told us a lot. We also feel that there's, more video, obviously from the January 11th recon mission. Where's that? And then where's the rest of the video of Porch Guy, ripping poor little Nancy out in her little jams with her little piggies, just being cruel. I mean, just horrible. All right, let's take a break from this before we go to Jim Clemente. And I want to watch some of Dr. Brocado on Brian Enton. And while I do this, it is now time. The time has come. You are enjoying yourself right now. The time has come for you to please subscribe. I know you're enjoying yourself. It is true. That is not the right video. So while I'm doing this, you have time to please subscribe. It is free. I do not want anything other than you subscribing and hitting that bell. Hey, Alpha, the only reason I can think that people are questioning January 11th is because really, we don't know. We don't know what date that was. We don't know. And again, tonight's show is being sponsored by Sheriff Chris Nanos deodorant. God only knows how hard that deodorant works. Say a prayer for that deodorant. Okay, so here we're going to go in and we're going to watch a few minutes. I don't know how long. We just let it go until we let it go. So let's watch Dr. Brocado. This is from April 15th. Let's watch.
Look like something else. And that's something I think we have to think about here as a possibility. But superficially speaking, the most likely motivation is somebody wanted money and messed up.
And had some connection to her.
Yes, I think that the probability is just, especially if she's deceased. Once this becomes a homicide, whether you intended it or not, the probability is just too enormous based on the statistics that you knew her.
When you're looking at a crime or murder or an abduction, and you're looking at the statistics and you're saying to yourself, okay, 92% of the time it's someone who knew the person, you're looking at all the different statistics. But then there's still that 8% that this is just the fluke and this is something crazy.
Right.
In your mind, when you're researching these kinds of things, when do you allow yourself to go, okay, maybe this is the fluke? Maybe this is something, or do you just say, look, the statistics are normally right. We got to go by probabilities and we got to stick with what we know.
Well, I think it's more like you wouldn't waste a lot of time and resources on the improbable, but the improbable does occur. I mean, I am aware of cases that are so outrageous that they're just unprecedented in the annals of crime, But chances are, this is eventually going to fall under, there's nothing new under the sun. Because I mean, what are the chances? I mean, very low. If you were a betting person, it wouldn't be a very wise thing to think that this is going to turn out to be some, totally improbable thing. The issue is that we're missing data. Once we find out what the premise is, all of this is going to look logical. All this strange because there's so many anomalies. But if you know the premise, it starts to make sense. I use the same approach when I work with people, for example, who have psychotic disorders. Their behavior can look super disorganized, but once I know the premise of what they believe or what they're hearing or seeing, then all of that behavior starts to make logical sense. You just have to take the time to find out the premise upon which it's based. We are too quick to think that things are just chaotic or disorganized. For example, we may eventually find out that there was a rational reason for waving flowers in front of the camera. It's one of the things I want to know, because unless you're an absolute imbecile, why would you do that?
Right.
There are questions like that I think are going to make sense later.
Yeah, and you're talking about when the suspect picked up the shrubbery or whatever it was and was.
Yes.
We don't really know why he did that.
We don't know the why.
Yeah.
That's the key, the why. And once we know the why, a lot of this will start to make a lot more sense.
You use the waiter and the chef analogy, and that you think that there's more than one person involved in this. And we know that there's like the $1 million plus reward now. Statistically, I don't know if there are statistics for this, but do accomplices turn on the boss? I mean, is there a chance that we'll see that happen, where the getaway driver or one of the people below, whoever planned this, will come forward?
Well, contrary to popular belief, there's very little honor among thieves, and money can be a very big inducement, which then raises the question: why is it not inducing anybody? That's very strange to me. Of course, it may be that the person, the accomplice, is dead, or the accomplice is at risk of being eliminated, because the larger the chain of people, the greater the risk to the person.
And we've talked about this. Could Porch Guy be dead? He screwed up. Nancy was not supposed to be injured. Nancy was supposed to be safely brought to a squishy bed and taken care of, and he screwed up. She probably got rascally and he punched her, did something. And I don't think it matters if Porch Guy is dead. If Porch Guy is dead and they still can get to him with a vehicle or something, he's still going to lead them to the chef.
In the center. So it is entirely possible that the person has got out of Dodge, or is keeping their mouth shut, or is afraid, or something like that. But I think that if it was as simple as, look, I could get this money, toss this person under the bus, and go live scot-free. But one of the other great puzzles of this case is why over $1 million has not been an attractive enough inducement. That's also very peculiar, and it could be because coming forward would just be too incriminating to the person involved more directly. So somebody has to be afraid to do so.
Yeah, makes sense. Something else you said struck me, because I've heard it not from any, professors or experts like you, but from some street cops said to me, I bet it's going to end up being a prisoner or someone in jail who has the tip. And that was just their sense. And I think you said the same thing, which I thought was interesting. Why do you believe that?
Well, because as I said, the hints that I get from the video footage of the camera guy suggest somebody with probably psychopathic quality, and people like that tend to have traits that go all the way back to childhood, of kind of delinquent behavior, versatile kind of crime, doing all kinds of things all over the map. Now there are more high functioning types that could be more fragmented and wind up in power or heads of corporations or things like that, where there's less overt stuff that is criminal like that, or more white collar. But what we tend to see with more lower functioning, primitive psychopathic types is they've been in trouble a lot, and they've come to the attention of law enforcement, sometimes even for petty things, shoplifting or something like that. So my sense is that people who are in contact with law enforcement, people who have been in trouble, are people who might recognize this character. But I also think that a person who is in an incarceration setting is going to be less afraid to say something about such a person if there is that element of danger. So let's put it this way: it can't hurt to go around asking. I also think, based on that type of character, you'd want to speak to the demi-monde. You'd want to talk to things like sex workers in the area and people like that, because if.
Do you guys think that Porch Guy's local? I mean, do we think that having PCSD or the task force going and talking to, the sex workers, the drug users in the area, that it could lead to somebody talking? I don't know. I mean, I could see him being local, but at the same time, you got those guys that did that wrench attack in Scottsdale that came from California. I could see him coming from Mexico across the border for sure. But does he have to have a passport? How is he getting, is he getting across in one of those, open areas of the border that apparently they know about? I don't know what to think either. I don't know. It's the rubber band. I'm past the boomerang. I'm on the rubber band now.
If a person who's up to no good comes into some money, chances are they're going to do something like that, or use it on drugs or alcohol or something like that. So you should be talking to people on the outskirts.
So coming into money. Okay. So if we think about again, if we think again about if Annie and Tomato needed money and they needed to pay someone Bitcoin, okay, they needed millions of dollars for whatever trouble they've gotten into. And because, again, Savannah has probably had risk assessment training because of her security in New York City and what she's doing. And she is at a higher level of, safety risk than the regular person. So it's very possible that Savannah had known about these wrench attacks. Okay, that's something on our bingo card this year. Okay, but she may have been aware of these just because it could be, in risk assessment training that she's been given. She may have shared that with Cam. She may have shared it with Annie. And, is it something as simple as Annie putting together this staged kidnapping? Let's kidnap Nancy, because if you recall, the aunt used to kidnap Annie and Cam and Sav and take them up to Phoenix, and then they'd call mom and say, we've been kidnapped. Okay, so there's a couple kidnappings that Annie has had in her life for fun. And then if she was aware of these wrench attacks, did they soft stage, meaning let's kidnap mom, let's hire a goon. I'm a community outreach person. I've got somebody. We can pay him some money when we get this money, but let's kidnap mom. Let's get this money that we owe and get this creep off our back, and then we'll return mom. Let's just get some ransom money because she's never going to give us millions of dollars that we need. We need something fast. We've been given a week to come up with $5 million. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? If you need money fast and you've heard about wrench attacks and you guys had fun, the aunt would kidnap you when you were little, take you to Phoenix, and everyone the next day would call, mom, we've been kidnapped. And it's, oh, I hope she brings you back. It just seems a little convenient. So if this is a soft staged kidnapping to get this money, and then Nancy was supposed to be returned because, let me get this video off of here. When when the three, Tomato, Annie, and Savannah, are walking down from Nancy's house to the memorial. Annie is heaving sobs. Their tears could be from completely different directions. Savannah weeps at the thought that her wealth and her fame brought this upon her precious mother, who she had on a pedestal. She feels the weight and the breadth of this entire nightmare is her fault. Could Annie have been heaving sobs? And Tommaso reaches and grabs them violently out of guilt. If Annie soft staged a kidnap because they needed money fast from some bad guys, what are you going to do? And it was just supposed to be a real enough kidnapping that they were going to get the money in Bitcoin, but it went all wrong. I'll have to look at that. I need to look at that because, again, Monks he's got a pretty good eye. You guys are so impressive. I wish I could sleuth. I mean, I try to sleuth, but I don't sleuth like you guys. I don't have any like graphic skills. I have Chad, the Chat GPT robot. That's all I have. And I try to sleuth, but you guys are really sleuthing. I know Joe is in here. Joe sleuths. Joe deep sleuths. Yes, Joe has really searched, you guys. Joe spends a lot of time looking at things I wouldn't even think to look at. So, I mean, I am in awe of all of you guys. Seriously, the sleuthing that goes on is so impressive. It's a serious thing. No, Joe's really good. I have to give him huge kudos for what he's done. All right, let me go to some Ann Burgess. And yes, I know he still has an email. I am totally going to, I own it. Joe has emailed me many times and given me all kinds of leads and things like that. And I feel very special. And I'm not going to share the emails. No. All right, let me, and I have it. So when I did that adult protective services theory from one of my viewers, JV, he's given me an entire flow chart and all kinds of goods. I'm going to do it. I just need to look into a few things. JV has tied Cameron Guthrie to the scientists that are missing or murdered and the whole alien thing. You guys, he's tied him. I can confirm that. And I'm going to share all those goods. So I have to say I'm so fortunate somehow or other. And so Crime Crunchies, if anyone is ever wondering why Crime Crunchies, it's supposed to be where we don't take a bite out of crime, we crunch it. But I can't use it. It's copyrighted. So it's just like, I guess I'm just weird and I have a stupid name for my show. And should I change the name from Crime Crunchies? I don't know if anyone can take that seriously. It's easy to say. All right, I'm blabbing again. Let me get this geared up. While I'm gearing this up, please subscribe. I've hit 11,000, but you know what? It's not good enough. I need 20. I need 20,000. I need a lot of people. All right, let's watch. Ann Burgess is, this is, I don't know if anyone watches Police Off the Cuff. Let me know if you do. I love these guys. These are one of the first people I subscribe to in true crime. These are retired NYPD cops and detectives, real gritty. And he's going to show a clip of Ann Burgess. And this is dated a month ago. So this could have been any time in May. So let's just watch this.
Well, the motive, first you want to always ask who's suffering the most of this, who is hurt the most. And in this case, it doesn't have to be the mother. It could be somebody in the family. Somebody, Savannah. It could be anybody in her orbit, so to speak. Husband. Certainly don't want to include the children, but you don't know. And I think that is a possible motive.
So the motive could have been to make Savannah Guthrie suffer.
Yes.
And she's haunted by that.
And she has.
Yeah.
I mean, it's her mother.
Yeah. She said it on the interview with her.
Yeah.
She was like, the idea that this could have been because of who I am, it really haunts her. But we don't have any evidence of that, right?
Raises a very interesting point.
I'm just going to go to Dr. Gary Bricado. So you can see they're throwing things at the wall. And we all heard that expression. We've all been students. Throw it at the wall, like when you write an essay. Throw all the bullshit at the wall, something will stick, and the professor will give you at least 10 points on your essay. But that sounds like a lot what they're doing. Yet I do respect these profilers, and I do know that they know what they're talking about. However, it may not apply to this because they're all doing what we call guesstimating or hypothesizing, theorizing. Phil calls it spitballing. Let me play a little bit of this from Dr. Gary Bricado.
It is fascinating to consider in terms of the Guthrie story, because what I would put to someone who was studying that case is that there were extras, things that happened there that were not necessary for the pragmatic process of simply abducting somebody for money. Keeping somebody in a pit for 14 days reveals a little bit of cruelty or anger toward them in addition to simply wanting money.
Or was it terror that if he
Exactly.
died, they'd be looking at homicide charges?
So it's interesting. So that when a person incurs risk, does something extra, then you start thinking there's an emotional element too. Like, I really hate this wealthy guy that I'm slaving for, and he deserves punishment. And that suggests to me, when you see those little extras, you start thinking, why does somebody resent this woman? Why does somebody resent these dynamics around this woman?
Mhm.
And then you start getting more into the truth of the matter. Because if this were truly an abduction or a robbery, it would look very practical. More happened here than was necessary. And
So, again, they are guessing. They're absolutely 100% guessing. And look, I appreciate all of their expertise, all of their education. Dr. Gary Bricado, a forensic psychologist, brilliant man. Dr. Ann Burgess, one of the first profilers. But are they wrong? Mike, I want to talk a little bit about, since your area of expertise for tonight anyway, is Dr. Gary Bricado. Your thoughts?
Yeah, Bill, Gary Bricado's been around for quite a while. He's been a criminologist. He's studied this, left, right, forward, backwards. And so his theory is there's two main theories. And this is kind of similar to what we thought in the very beginning, that it was actually, initially it was intended to be a real kidnapping with a real ransom for money. Nothing more complicated than that. We thought that in the beginning. We heard very early on that there was, attempts made to get Bitcoin, but very quickly, we and many other people expressed our doubts about it. It just didn't seem to go right the way from what we knew. That was information that was being given to us by the Pima County Sheriff, Chief Sheriff Nanos. It didn't seem like it really held up to be that kind of theoretical, kind of crime. Then Gary Bricado thinks it could be either that true crime, that true kidnapping that went south. And going south meant that something bad happened. Maybe she had some sort of heart attack. Maybe she fought and they had because of the blood that was by the front door. We've talked about that. And therefore, what was going to be a kidnapping, a short kidnapping for money, and everybody would be happy. And that was the original intent.
Okay. So that's that. All right. So, all right, we're getting kind of 6:30, and I know tonight is TIR, and I want to make sure you guys all have time to go get your popcorn. But I really want to go really quick, super quick. Because I had Jim Clementi Let's see what we've got for him. All right, really quick. I'm just going to pick a couple of his because I also have John Fitzgerald. Victim alive leaving house was possible, and now he states the blood evidence strongly supports that she exited alive, so it's strengthened. Doorbell camera was useful evidence. Now he's saying calls the doorbell camera one of the offender's biggest mistakes, is much stronger. DNA evidence, expected forensic opportunities. Now he believes DNA will likely become one of the case's strongest investigative tools. I'm hoping, but I don't have any, I'm not, let's just say I'm not betting. I'm not putting 10 on red. Okay. If you remember that, I was going to put 10 on red for Joe. So, all right. Tattoo or exposed skin, initially uncertain. Now it says visible exposed skin or tattoos could prove critical in identifying the offender, but I don't think that we've got much of that. Offender confidence, fairly confident offender. Now thinks offender became overconfident and careless. So that's shifted. Need for control is present, still sees control as important, but focuses less on personality than Brucato, I guess. Let's see, moderately, much stronger likelihood of arrest, believed solvable. Now he has become increasingly confident the offender ultimately made enough mistakes to be identified. Boy, can we only hope. Technology, helpful to investigators, and now he believes digital evidence may ultimately solve the case. Behavior after crime unknown, and now he's saying later communications provide behavioral clues, but also additional opportunities for investigators. Okay. All right, so let's go in. Again, Jim Clemente is one of the only ones that I've heard that says he believes there's only one offender, and that's because there's no evidence of anything else. Okay, so let's go into Jim Fitzgerald, retired FBI supervisory special agent and forensic linguist. All right, so primary motive early on was left open. Money could be genuine. Now he's saying strongly leans toward mission-oriented revenge with ransom secondary or a pretext, which is interesting because if, you know, in some of the rabbit holes I've talked about, if, let's just say, if this is family, why would they do this if they didn't need the money? That's something we need to think about. So if we believe that this could be Annie and Tomato and they needed money, they needed Bitcoin, and we're going to get rid of mom so we can get money, were they more wanting to hurt Savannah? Because if they're needing money, Derek Colella, where's the Bitcoin? We're waiting for it. You need money, you need to do something, then money is the motive. But this does feel more emotional. All right, knowledge of the home. Fitzgerald says probably knew the residents beforehand, even more convinced offender had prior familiarity. Relationship to Savannah earlier was mentioned cautiously. Now increasingly views the Savannah connection as behavioral significant. Yes, this is all about Savannah. Who'd you piss off? Proof of life, not yet available, and then now considers the absence of convincing proof of life behaviorally significant, meaning she died very soon, unfortunately. I just love how the news thought that that was breaking news, that she died very early on. We all knew that because we know this is our entire life. Offender stress was unknown, and now he believes offender is likely experiencing increasing psychological strain, sleep disruption, and possibly greater substance use. What? Substance use. Mistakes after crime, wait and see. Now he says, thanks repeated communications increase investigative opportunities. So he's mission-oriented. Early interviews focused on planning, offender behavior, ransom analysis. The ransom notes became the profile for Fitz. As additional notes appears, he increasingly discussed sentence structure, vocabulary, punctuation, recurring phrases, emotional tone, deception indicators, internal consistency. Okay. So he believes that the offender is having mounting stress, disrupted sleep, hypervigilance. I don't know. I mean, this person could have hypervigilance, being afraid to leave the house. All right, let me stop the screen. Okay. Okay, well, this is all we have time for tonight because I know TIR is on at 7 Central, 8 Eastern, and I know everyone's going to want to pop over there. So thank you all so much for joining me tonight. Thank you just for spending time with me and listening to me and talking and sharing your ideas and your thoughts. It's all important. It's all relevant. It's all connected. And we all need to spitball off each other. Okay? We're going to look at everything. Nothing is off the table, including the sponsor of our show, Chris Nanos Deodorant. His deodorant is tough acting, not hot 100-degree weather in his Corvette. Thank you so much, Chris Nanos Deodorant. All right, you guys, I will be going live again, and I cannot wait to spend more time with you guys. I will say hello in TIR tonight. Please say hello to me as well. And until the next time, I will catch you on the flip side. Toodaloo.